Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Dina's not online, I see. Jerry, we just can't hear you. If you have some audio problems, let us know later on. So we'll go ahead and get started. Tonight we welcome Kelsey Bedwell, correct? To talk about the VIA program or other things Horizon Transportation's looking at. Could you share with us what's going on, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for giving me some space to share about the exciting innovation happening with Horizons with you all. So we are just a couple months out from launch of a program known as VIA. And VIA is an on-demand public transportation alternative. So what it is if you've used Uber or Lyft, it's very similar. You have an app on your phone and you can book a ride in real time. There are some definite differences with VIA and Uber and Lyft that make it a little more accessible. So for those of you who haven't used Uber or Lyft, VIA might still be a good option. Is it okay if I share my screen? I have a couple of slides just to keep myself on track. Okay. So I'll share this quick presentation. That come through okay?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, of course. So just to introduce myself officially, I'm Kelsey Bedwell. I'm the Director of Financial Stability at Horizon. So I oversee our programs that seek to improve and increase the financial stability of islands. So it's an exciting job. It involves transportation through VIA and some financial counseling. So to begin with, what is VIA? So VIA is a dynamic on-demand transportation system. Like I mentioned earlier, it's similar to Uber or Lyft. What makes it different is, unlike Uber or Lyft, it's based on an app on a smartphone, but for individuals who don't have a smartphone, it's also can be scheduled with even a landline or a regular cell phone through a toll-free phone number. And you can still use that phone number to schedule a real-time ride. So it almost blends the availability and accessibility of like a cab, a traditional cab service with the new innovative technology of Uber or Lyft. And it kind of marries those together into one system and program that make it where people of all tech skills and capabilities can access this service and get quick on-demand service. When we say on demand, the typical wait time for an Uber service or for a VIA service is about 10 to 20 minutes. So pretty quick. So just to give you a little idea, I'm going to show a screen of how VIA routing works. So the way VIA routing works is it seeks to optimize the number of clients or passengers we're able to serve, but utilizing less vehicles. So in the case of North Liberty, we would be looking at something like 3 vehicles, which sounds pretty few to serve a whole city, with a 6-seat capacity as our vehicles. And we would say maybe 100 requests per day is a pretty standard estimation. So what we can see is in this real-time simulator, VIA uses 3 vehicles, and through the route mapping algorithms, you can see that there's multiple passengers in the vehicle at one time. So it's a shared ride service, which is going to decrease the number of vehicles necessary to serve a larger area, while also increasing the efficiency of allowing riders to be dropped off and picked up in an efficient way. There's some things on this screen. It looks a little complex, but it'll kind of show wait time. So it's exhibiting that in this scenario that we've selected for North Liberty, it'd be about a 12-minute wait time.
Hey, Kelsey,
and you can see, yeah.
Is this showing up for anybody else? Is this scenario showing up?
I'm just seeing her.
Security fault.
You need to switch screens.
There we go. Thank you so much.
That's okay. I've been doing this for so long.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I forgot. I accidentally shared the PowerPoint instead of the screen. Thank you so much. So now that you can actually see what I was talking about, here's that display. So this is showing sort of a depiction of using 3 vehicles, how many passengers we could serve at one time. So you can see it's a really robust system. We've got a lot of interchanges and a lot of pickups and drop-offs tied to one vehicle and one route. The wait time over here that I mentioned, you can kind of see it's varying between 10 and 12 minutes. And again, we see that we're serving 52 rides, but we're serving 8 riders per van per hour. And of course, this is in the case that it isn't COVID, and so we're not social distancing, but there are adjustments we would be able to make for social distancing. So this is just kind of a basic scenario to show that we would have vehicles picking up multiple people at one time and dropping them off. So that is a lot of algorithm based and very technical, so I won't go too far into that, but just to give an intro. And can you guys see my PowerPoint again now?
Yep.
Okay, just to make sure I'm sharing the right thing. So the solutions that VIA presents to a city the size of North Liberty and just transportation as a whole, we of course see decreased wait times and travel times, which is really important. We see a lot of times in the public transit system that there's a lot of interchanges and exchanges, and there's a lot of concern with the first mile, last mile service. But the VIA program really solves that concern, and it allows us to serve more clients more efficiently and give people back their time, which is really important. It also increases the availability of accessible transportation. So in that kind of small simulation I showed you, it didn't really show that, but with VIA, you don't have to have a separate paratransit service and a normal transit service. Those become one, which is an incredible opportunity to increase the accessibility, but also equity of transportation, because we would have the route mapping would allow someone who needed wheelchair accessible transportation to simply select a wheelchair icon on their app and still receive an on-demand transportation service within that 10 to 12 minute window. This also has some positive social effects, because instead of having a separate service, we see that people with disabilities that need rides with physical limitations are interacting and exchanged right with individuals who need normal transit service. And so that's a really encouraging opportunity for us to increase that equity and accessibility of transportation. That's also something that with the current on-demand models like Uber and Lyft, there's not that accessibility piece. So that's something that was really important to us as a nonprofit in looking at a new service model. There's also some dynamic real-time reporting and route changes. So if there's road construction or increased demand because North Liberty has a special event for the day, or you want to know how your service was on Sunday at noon compared to Saturday at noon, or whatever it may be, there's real-time reporting. So we can pull those and report on that information just right as it's happening, which with our current system and with a lot of public transportation systems, we don't have that quick of a response time. So having that happens so quick and just right when we need it is really helpful to determine efficacy. This, of course, also improves transportation equity as a whole, not only through increased accessibility, but VIA as an app and the phone-based service is available in over 15 languages. That is an incredible opportunity to serve individuals who speak a variety of languages and make sure that they have the same level of accessible, convenient transportation as everyone else. So it's a really great solution to a lot of public transit concerns. Specifically for the North Liberty solution, the things that we see, and this is just coming from me and my knowledge of North Liberty, so there's some other things I'm sure, but it would allow us to increase partnerships with local businesses and services, to increase employment opportunities both within and outside of North Liberty. It would also increase and attract the ability for individuals to commute into North Liberty for jobs. It can increase the number of citizens using public transportation. This is really important with VIA because it impacts the environment. We're using less vehicles to transport more people and increases transportation equity and accessibility. So individuals of any limited English proficiency or physical disability or anything are going to get the same level and quality and access to service as everyone else, which is always an attempt with current public transportation systems, but it's difficult to implement in a truly equitable way. It can also establish North Liberty as a leader for public transportation solutions in Iowa communities, which is an incredible opportunity. Horizons specifically, why we are the best solution and the host for VIA. We have been around for 25 years as a leader in transportation. Currently, our operations are mostly in Cedar Rapids, but we've been expanding our entire history. We started just serving the Wellington Heights neighborhood of Cedar Rapids, and since we've expanded to serve Cedar Rapids, Marion, Hiawatha, and Robbins. So we definitely have a growth mindset, and we've increased our service to meet emerging needs in the community for 25 years. We currently operate in Johnson County, not as NTS, but we recently merged with Elder Services in Johnson County. So our program hosts the Meals on Wheels services for Johnson County. And so Horizons is already established in Johnson County, just we don't have the transit service available yet, and we'd love to do that. This also, with us as an agency, our focus is on increasing equity and access to gainful employment for individuals. The neighborhood transportation service Horizons host operates when the city buses aren't running to allow individuals that work jobs outside of the normal working hours to still have access to affordable, efficient, accessible transportation to get to and from work. And so that's something that we've already been in the business of doing for 25 years. So being able to expand that through VIA and throughout Eastern Iowa is really important to us. We're also flexible and responsive to changing community needs, and we do that currently without VIA. The Cedar Rapids Public Transit recently shut down because of derecho for a couple of days, and we, without even a drop of a hat, within 6 hours, we're up and running to take people where they needed to go and to help out, because our vehicles were smaller and more dynamic and we could run when big city buses couldn't. We did the same thing when the city buses had to shut down for capacity for COVID for a while. So it's definitely in our forte to be a strong, collaborative, and flexible partner with communities. Finally, just some outcomes. There would be some cost savings. We would, of course, talk about equity again. There would be increased equity. Our passenger satisfaction of public transit riders would increase because that on-demand model is going to increase the accessibility. We'd have a decreased environmental impact because we'd operate smaller vehicles, use dynamic on-demand routing that's going to serve more people with less vehicles. And this would increase the population utilization of public transit. We would measure those a couple ways with some numbers and surveys, and that's all done through the app. So it's super convenient and we can pull that information in real time. There's some case studies that I find really interesting. I'd be happy to share these with the group after because I don't want to go into them, but Lone Tree is the most interesting one to me when thinking about North Liberty. Lone Tree, Colorado has a population of 14,000. I think North Liberty's is just over 19,000, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So a little close in size. North Liberty is a little bigger, but Lone Tree, Colorado is able to serve 1,000 passengers a week in a city of 14,000 residents, and they use 4 vehicles to do that. So it's a really neat solution to offer a broad range of service in a dynamic way. When they implemented VIA in Lone Tree, they had a 41% increase in rides, which is a huge impact on the community. The other fascinating case study is Norwalk, Connecticut. Quite a bit different in population size, but the big difference is Norwalk's a growing city, much like North Liberty. They have a great wait time. So their old public transportation system had a 30-minute wait time. They were able to reduce that to 12 with VIA. And something that I find really interesting, the mayor of Norwalk, I believe, or it may have been the city manager, after they implemented VIA, made the statement that VIA transformed their public transit from a service of necessity to a service of choice, which is a really great opportunity to offer a service to the community, an impact on the environment, and all at a choice. So I tried to keep it really broad, just give you all an overview of VIA, but I'm happy to answer any questions and hope I didn't go through that too quickly.
Average cost per ride.
Average cost per ride. Yep. So in the Lone Tree, Colorado, that's a good example. I believe that was the average cost per ride was $8, $9, below 10. So, which is where that shared ride comes
Distance.
in. I'm sorry.
Was that an unrestricted distance?
No, they did have a restriction. Let me pull up what that was. So in Lone Tree, the service area is a 25 square mile service area. And you know what? I actually misspoke. Their fleet size in Lone Tree was only 2 buses. And so they serve 1,000 people a week with 2 buses, which is even more incredible.
So do the buses do they work in a particular zone, just besides that 25 square mile?
So a lot of the routing is just done through the algorithms of the app. So the buses wouldn't like stay on the east side or the west side. No, it would just route match based on who needed to go where. And it runs a few different scenarios and chooses the one that would get people to their location the fastest. But there's no zone restrictions for the operating vehicles.
So if you have one person that calls and that may be the only one on the bus, does it still run?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. The goal is always the shared ride service, but there are definitely scenarios where there's one person. And like in the case of COVID, we would limit capacity to 1 or 2 people, whatever we would do to keep social distancing.
And
I noticed you said 15 languages. I'm assuming that's for online access.
That's available on the app and the phone.
Okay. Now, so if someone's dealing in one of those languages that's not English, what happens when they interface with the driver, et cetera? Is that an issue there?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So because the ride is scheduled entirely either through the app or through the phone, they would get the notification of their pickup time in their preferred language, and they would get the notification and the payment and all of that. It would be all processed through the phone and the app. So the only concern would be just the driver being able to tell the passenger hello and communicate with them and make them feel comfortable. But all of the logistical side of things is handled either by phone or app. So there's not often a language barrier issue there.
And we would be able to issue like a discount if somebody in their profile was of a certain age, then we could offset some of the cost of their trip, or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the app is 100% dynamic in that way. So you can issue discount codes for anything you desire. It can be a code that lasts for a day. It can be for people of a certain age group. It can be for individuals going to certain locations. It's a very dynamic payment system that you can institute and change discount codes really quickly. And if you have specific questions about if a lot of questions do come up in processing just the actual technology in the app and how that works, I'm happy to bring in someone from VIA to cover that side of things in depth. And they have an even more in-depth presentation of the system itself and can show you what that app interface would look like for the rider and the discount codes and things like that.
Any other public subsidies?
Just to clarify, are you asking if it can correlate with other public subsidies?
Well, do you get a direct subsidy from any community that you serve?
I don't, that's not exactly set in stone, no.
So when people,
Go ahead, Jim.
so when people get a ride, and are they just substituting this if that's within their financial means for like the Lyft and Uber because it's run better?
Yeah, so there's definitely the aspect of there's sort of different client bases that you would serve with this program. So on the one hand, absolutely, Brian, there's people who just are using this in place of Uber and Lyft because the service is maybe a little more accessible. So for example, someone with a wheelchair couldn't use Uber or Lyft, but they could use Via. But on the other hand, there's also a portion of the population that could use this to eliminate having to use a single-use car quite as often as a choice of their environmental impact. We also, in launching this program, are making it very clear that we are very focused on equity and giving people access to gainful employment. So there's also sort of the rides with a social conscious side of things where people could choose to take this, knowing that the money they would spend on public transportation is going to further allow access to convenient public transportation for other individuals.
Jim,
Yes?
want to ask a question?
No, I don't have a question. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What are the fares based on? Is it a rate per mile or per region, or how is that charged?
That's where it's super customizable, which is incredible. So depending on the jurisdiction we're in and the area we're serving, we are able to set that. So in the case of North Liberty, we would set that based on what you find appropriate for your citizens and what the cost is and what subsidies may be available and things like that. So more often than not, it's a flat rate. So it's set at like up to 5 miles, it would be $3 or something like that, just because that's the easiest for riders to comprehend, and it encourages people to give it a try because they know the cost up front. But there are some scenarios where it becomes priced per mile.
And you were saying that there's a range of, say, 25 miles from wherever our hub is. So
Yeah.
that would include like Iowa City and Coralville or Tiffin within our range, or are we talking about just service for North Liberty?
Yeah, so that's, again, customizable. It's not, it's something that you can set, and it's even something you can change in real time. So you could set the parameter be 25 miles, and you could make exceptions for outside of 25 miles and make exceptions to not serve areas within a radius if there were concerns with traffic or road conditions or things like that. So very customizable in that way. It would just depend on the availability of fleet size for the exact program and the communication to individuals.
Brenda, were you thinking about the possibility like you would have a group that goes to the hospital to work at a particular time?
Well, I'm just thinking of, in terms of people who say don't have a car and don't qualify for our yellow cab service, that they could get out of North Liberty if they needed to, if they had somewhere to go. Because right now that service is proscribed to certain areas, whereas this would be more, I mean, of general public use with more options. But I just wanted to know what we were thinking of and what they're able to do too.
Yeah, that's a great question. Of course, if you get that radius a little bigger, it requires a few more vehicles just to make sure wait times don't get high. But knowing that you can serve 25 square miles with 2 vehicles makes it pretty reasonable that you could expand that should you desire.
So if North Liberty goes into a, I'm sorry, my voice is weird
That's
right
okay.
now. If North Liberty comes into an arrangement with you, I'm losing my train of thought. I have to come back to this. I've lost it.
That's okay. No problem at all.
So there's a couple different groups that approach me about the North Liberty Transportation Assistance Program, and they want it. They don't have transportation of their own. They want to get to a couple different places. One is to work. So, but Circuitous taxi service back and forth to work 5 days a week into Iowa City, for example, just would break the bank with the taxis. And then to get to Kirkwood Community College on the southeast side of Iowa City. So I feel like, Kelsey and I have talked a little bit, but this is just a creative idea. It's just an idea, and thank you so much, Kelsey, for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, if we come into an arrangement for North Liberty, the cost per mile and everything is covered by the fare. What is the city's cost to have this?
Yeah, the operational fee is going to be the fees for the vehicles dedicated to the city. So there's a monthly fee to utilize the VIA software, and that service, along with the vehicle itself, that would be specific to North Liberty, would be the fees. So. And if that's something you all want to see numbers on, I'm happy to, I can get from VIA the proposal for what those monthly fees would add up to in a year for 2 vehicles to serve North Liberty. I'd be happy to share those. I just don't have them right now.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cedar Rapids starts in December, you said, with this program?
That should, yes, assuming there's no more derechos or a bigger pandemic or anything, that should be the case. Yeah.
So maybe after a few months of seeing what happens there, maybe
Yes.
we can talk again.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing, you mentioned specifically the desire for specific transportation to work and to Kirkwood on the southeast side. That's the other neat thing about VIA is if the demand for that sort of transportation gets high enough, and someone mentioned the hospital as well, VIA also has the option to do a blended service. So we would offer both set pre-scheduled and say we'll do a whole huge bus of 20 passengers or our biggest vehicle from 7 o'clock from North Liberty at this bus stop to the hospital, or we would do like a virtual pickup. So it wouldn't be like one bus stop or a physical bus stop, but a virtual bus stop. And we would pick up every passenger that needed to go to Iowa City by 8 and take them in one big group. So it almost blends fixed route with on demand. But that would be something that we would evaluate and implement after like some sort of service launch. But that would be an option if demand got really big for a certain area.
So that's really kind of one of the things we're looking for, is to get a way of being more efficient about what we're doing. Right now we're not as efficient as we could be, and we spend a lot of money on one thing that less people use, and I'd rather spend the same amount of money where a bunch of people could use it more efficiently. And then, in the meantime, some of what could be, we could have some assistance, public assistance, because we've kind of committed to that already, and just make our money go a little bit further. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And from what we've seen in implementing in the implementation process of VIA with our current service, it definitely achieves that end of being able to serve a lot more people. And the flexibility is huge as well. Sorry, I also have dogs. So the flexibility, it just allows us to make those changes in real time. So if we need to implement discount codes or change those discount codes or change services, we can do that within a matter of days, and it communicates through the app or the phone to the client. So there's no marketing or communications errors on our end. It's just automatically through that phone and app system. So.
A quick question back on equipment again.
Yeah.
So in the case where if down the road, if we were to implement, let's say a North Liberty to Iowa City work bus or situation, what happens with that vehicle during the middle of the part of the day? I mean, do you have other services around Iowa City that can utilize that, or?
Sorry about that. I'm not sure quite what happened. So just give me a few seconds here and we'll be back up.
Okay. Is everybody back up?
Everybody, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, back to my question. The equipment, what happens with a larger bus in the middle of the day process? Do you have uses for that bus in other areas nearby?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the route mapping of VIA, so if we set it to do say, the Kirkwood route in the morning, and it was specifically a North Liberty bus to serve that area, then it would drop off at Kirkwood. It would see if there was anyone that needed to go from Kirkwood to North Liberty and take them back. And then in the day, it would serve the North Liberty area. So that way it would still take as few vehicles as possible. But that would just depend on what the service parameters we set were.
So like then initially you could start out with a smaller vehicle as we're using elsewhere and only go to a larger vehicle when demand got to the point where we needed either one large vehicle or a couple of small vehicles.
Yep, absolutely. It's very dynamic. The cool thing about VIA too, I am not very techie or mathematical, but it is a very robust and well-developed algorithm. So it is really good at predicting when you need to increase vehicle size and capacity without doing that too soon. So it does a really good job of managing your cost per ride by keeping the vehicle expenses down when possible. So it's pretty robust.
Are all your vehicles wheelchair capable?
So what we would do for, no, not currently. What we would do for a North Liberty transit system is if we were serving the city with only 2 vehicles, we would ensure that both vehicles were wheelchair accessible. And then if we needed to expand, we would expand with non-wheelchair vehicles. But to get a wheelchair accessible vehicle, all people would have to do is press a wheelchair button on the app or say on the phone call they need that, and it would redo the routing to ensure they got an accessible vehicle.
Other questions, Jim?
That's all I have.
Okay.
So in Cedar Rapids, when you're starting up, who's paying the startup costs for vehicles and stuff?
I can't announce that fully yet, but that'll be a press release we'll have soon. Sorry about that, Brian. Good question, though. It's a collaborative partnership. I can mention that.
Anything else?
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I will send along those links to those case studies so you can review them further. That'll also connect you to the VIA website as a whole, so you can see a little bit more about it if you're curious. And then if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Or if you want to know more about the tech side of things or talk a little bit more about specifics, I'm happy to bring in some of our actual VIA partners who can really do those a lot of the really good live examples and kind of shows of what the interface looks like.
Fair enough. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Initial impressions?
There's some unanswered questions is related to finance, but the concept seems, kind of a blend of getting another Uber / Lyft thing that we could actually subsidize part of it for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Would be a little more efficient.
This sounds kind of what was stuck in my mind as like a dial-a-ride service that would have some flexibility. So I see a lot of pluses with it.
So I know I think it's Austin in Texas, they are D big busing because it's just not efficient, and they're going to more of a model like this. And so there's kind of routes that they can follow, but the vehicle can, it's not a big bus, but it's like more of the van and stuff, and they can go on and off that route a little bit and not lose a lot of time and still keep people mostly on schedule. And it seems to be working a little better and a little more efficient for folks. So.
And keep costs down at the same time. Brenda, what do you think?
Well, I like the idea. The thing about costs, this sounds like it's less than Uber or Lyft and certainly less than a cab unless you're in our transit assistance program. And I like the efficiency of it. I mean, as a rider of the bus, I know I like paying $1, per trip to be on the bus. But yes, the bus isn't a very efficient way to move people when there aren't that many people on it.
Mm-hmm.
So until we get to the point where people abandon their cars and want buses, this is a good alternative.
Well, we'll keep pressing ahead with this, and as we get information, pass it out.
Yeah, I'd like to, if she's, when they get those links, email them out and we can take a peek at it and
Yeah.
and look at it a little bit more. When I looked up to Lone Tree, Colorado, just looking at it, it's a suburb of Denver, so it's not going to quite be the same as here because of where you can go and stuff. But their 25 square mile thing would be not very much, but I think for us, if we were doing something, we would expand it a little bit, and I think that would get us into Coralville and for to the mall, at least from here. And if other things are going on like that, and maybe Coralville would like to kind of get in there and stuff, and that would just make it much more efficient for everybody. So
Yeah, does that Colorado one interface with the Denver bus system at all?
I didn't hear that.
Oh, does the Colorado bus system, pardon?
I didn't hear
Does the Colorado bus system interface with the Denver system at all?
I don't know.
yeah, I don't think she said anything about that. So
My guess is if you're calling for a ride to get you from point A to point B could be one of those connections, as long as that's within their radius.
yeah, I mean, for sure it would be with us, I think, as an option. So
Yeah.
Head with it. Next item is that asked you all about finalize some recommendations to the city council to add services to the cab program. Did we agree to go ahead and want to include Walmart?
I think we said yeah.
Yeah.
I think that some people were concerned that Walmart pharmacy and Walmart was different, and they felt bad about going to Walmart if they were going to pharmacy, which it makes no difference, and so we might as well just add that on there, and that gets them to Aldi's, and the only problem is Target has a pharmacy. They do a lot of business.
Other places that we had talked about or were mentioned was the senior center in downtown Iowa City. Also reevaluate school practices for student populations and needs. I think the specific thing there was enable a parent or somebody to go pick up a sick kid or something, and also go to parent-teacher conferences.
Oops. Yeah, I think that would be, I don't think that would add a significant cost, but may add a significant improvement in the system to go into those places. We'd have to figure out how to get the school aware so that they could help with the part about school and stuff.
Do we want to touch about Kirkwood Community College on the southeast part of town yet?
How many people in the demographic that use this service are going to Kirkwood?
Angie,
I've had-
you know?
About 2.
2? Okay.
Would they otherwise qualify-ish for the transit assistance?
Oh yes, so they can use. They already have.
Okay.
2 of the 3 already have cards, and they've used it for the purposes that are outlined in the program. But I've had one person contact me saying, "Oh well, that's what I need it for. I don't need to apply, I guess." she would have qualified. She doesn't have a vehicle,
Mhm.
but
the only place she wanted to go was the place we weren't going. Okay.
So, but it would, do you have an idea if they go every day or?
yeah, I don't know. I just kind of shut that down immediately, kind of. Say, well, we can't, that's just not in the program.
What would people think about if we do that and say Kirkwood? If you're going to say Kirkwood, then I think you probably ought to say the university, because I think that may impact people as well for educational stuff. And maybe we have like a limited number of those passes just to start out with anyway, just to keep the costs down in case it became just astronomically expensive. But we can at least start someplace, and then that'll get us, these three folks going and have a little wiggle room. And then if more people need it, we can kind of reevaluate how we are.
That sounds like a good idea.
Could we maybe look at Kirkwood at Coralville first and get a gauge on that one?
They're probably close enough, aren't they?
Is this thing up here?
I haven't had anybody ask about that Kirkwood building. And we do take them to the nearest CAN bus stop. So if they needed to get to Iowa City for school, they can always take CAN bus in from. It's just Kirkwood doesn't have a really good direct route. That's all. In Iowa City.
Hey,
Is this a mobility issue or a don't have a car issue?
It's a lack of a vehicle.
Okay. Because the CAN buses aren't all equipped to, they aren't all accessible. But
okay. Let's put that one on the back burner for a little bit then. Senior Center downtown, Iowa City was the other specific one mentioned.
Yep, I'm for that.
How the rest of you feel? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how. Well, a lot of people that would go down there may be able to get down there in a vehicle from one of our senior living facilities too, but I'm not sure how. If they live on their own in their own home, they may not qualify for that either. So, yeah, I don't know.
This wouldn't. So that my understanding is we just want to allow the people who are already eligible for the transit program to go additional spot. So it wouldn't be really extending just anybody else. It would just be the people who are already qualified would be able then to get down to the senior center.
Now we can look at it that way. Yeah.
Because we would still expect the folks who live, at like Keystone, if their vehicle was going down, that they would just use that.
They would just use it, yeah. Does anyone know yet if the senior center is having activities right now, or if?
No.
Okay, so we can kind of push this one down the road a little bit.
Yeah, we can.
Well, and that might be one of those that we kind of explore. In other words, add it when it makes sense to do that, or at least collect information between now and then. If we get requests about that we could open it up as a trial basis type of thing and add it if it looks like it has good ridership or something.
Okay.
So, all right. So if the senior center opens back up, are we okay with then the council just changing the rule for that right off the bat without coming back to transit?
Center will be closed through at least the end of the year. Just so you know, just you have a timeline in your head.
You still, yeah. So
Is there anything else anybody else wanted to add or talk about? Okay, other concerns or things you want to talk about that we haven't touched on?
Do you want to talk about the rail,
Not
the light
really,
rail?
but go ahead.
So, well, so the light rail, they're continuing to study that, and it would kind of run kind of somewhere between Penn Street and Forever Green Road to Iowa City. So with the significant cost outlay to refurbish the lines and then rebuild stations and then buy equipment for that and stuff. So I don't really understand why they think they can get as many people a day riding that, because their cost estimate shows them people 3,500 people a day riding from North Liberty to Iowa City and back. So their ride, so it'd be 1,800 people. So that's still kind of being worked through by the MPO and stuff. So it's still out there. So
Where would that be originating?
it's
About the Forever Green Road area.
Yeah.
Geez,
Where?
Forever Green, starting at Penn and going down basically through and near the Iowa City downtown area in the university.
but it would run on the train track that's already there, which runs through Coralville, kind of in the ravine, and
Is that the Krandic line or whatever they
This
call
is
it?
the Krandic line.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, I should be able to pick that up a couple blocks from my house. And
You would be able to.
Walk down to the library.
The
yeah,
initial,
and I think it actually takes a south turn once you get by the VA. So it may be quite a
Oh.
the initial capital outlay they're looking at is approximately $55 million. And that's for equipment, stations, and everything else to get it started. The thing is that they're looking at, initially, they were basing some of the revenue things on about $1.50 per trip. But in the end, it would have to have about $1.4 million in subsidies from the communities in order to successfully operate.
makes the bus look pretty good now.
Yeah. Well, I had not heard of a standalone service from North Liberty into Iowa City on rail. I'd heard Cedar Rapids to Iowa City, and that might be a possibility to add in Iowa City. But so this is new to me, I guess.
The total focus basically has been from North Liberty to Iowa City. Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty. So change that scope.
So I'm just getting the sense more and more that I've been reading about, municipalities, that it's the more the via, flexible, scalable is the way of the future, and less of the, in our area, the big systems.
Yeah, I think the VIA one makes more sense than the train at this point. If you're talking about just North Liberty, I would think really to get rail into our picture, it's only us riding on another project that would bring in larger groups from Cedar Rapids, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Comments or questions or things you want to discuss?
Well, now that everyone knows how to work remotely, we may not need to travel anymore.
Yeah, that'll probably end sometime, Brenda. Come on.
I just have a couple updates
Go
that
ahead.
weren't mentioned before. Is that okay? If
Sure.
this is the moment? Okay. So I have spoken to the University of Iowa International Center. They're going to do some translations of some of our pamphlets into Spanish for us. We have our first ELA or Spanish speaking applicant. And so I quickly tried to come up with a situation on how I could onboard her correctly and make sure she understood the program. So I was able to connect with Rosemary from Clear Creek, Amana, who does this service for them, and she came out and helped me that day. But just for the future, just so make sure we're embracing diversity, we're going to translate our documents application into Spanish, at least to start with. I have also, since our last meeting, reached out to all of the schools that our North Liberty kids go to and talk to their family resource officers, make sure that they remind them that I exist, that I'm out there and I'm a resource. So, yep.
Okay.
Do you have any other languages that you're planning on translating into? I know there's a Congolese community here, and they speak French and Swahili,
Yes.
and so
French would be the next one. For
yeah, I don't know how many of them are in the situation where they need the service, but it'd be good to have that ready.
Okay. Good point. Anything else, folks? If not, we stand adjourned, and thank you for your listening this evening and giving us some directions.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Night.